What's up, Coordination? How you doing? On this episode of the GreenPilled Podcast, I'm joined by David Hoffman, the founder and the host of Bankless, which is fun to have him on the GreenPilled Podcast, considering I've been on the Bankless podcast a couple times, and this podcast is hosted on the Bankless network. And Juan Benet, who is the founder at Protocol Labs and is involved in Filecoin and many other great projects in the ecosystem. On this episode, we are talking about what would have to be true for crypto to be good for the world. And for those of you who are skilled at reading between the lines, this is a tough episode to produce in the wake of the FTX implosion last week. And I think that a lot of people in this industry are licking their wounds and thinking about the massive amount of capital destruction that was caused by SBF and a structure at FTX that resembled more TradFi than DeFi. So in this episode, we talk about the social causes of crypto. We talk about the tension between crypto being money games and crypto having rights and being good and being pro-social for the world. We talk about education, TradFi versus DeFi, getting people over the learning curve of holding their own keys and holding their own crypto. And, my basic plus minus for crypto being good for the world is, listen, Ethereum has taken care of the carbon output from its network down to almost zero. There's still a problem with rugs in the industry with 3AC Luna, the capital destruction that came from that. But the positive things that we're seeing coming out of crypto are remittances, access to US dollars from anywhere in the world. Multi-sigs are a way easier way of managing common property than the complex legal mechanisms usually required. Emerging democratic governance approaches that are being pioneered by some DAOs. NFTs allowing for property rights on digital artifacts. Money pouring into privacy tech that wouldn't have been previously. This is not an exclusive list, but it's just kind of to give you an idea of the plus minus that I have in my head after recording this episode with Juan and David. And I think that we really get into some of the evolution that we're going to see in Web3 over the next cycle in this episode. So what would have to be true for crypto to be good for the world? This episode is a part of the answer to that question, and I hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, I'll give you Juan Benet and David Hoffman. Enjoy.
Working in Web3 is awesome. It's freeing, powerful, and so much fun. But working outside of the typical W-2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many people. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best, their work, while OPOLIS manages the back end. There's a lot of nation-state overhead when working in Web3, and OPOLIS takes care of all of the back end stuff, freeing you up to do what you do best, your work. OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. So do what you love and maintain your financial security with OPOLIS. You must be authorized to work inside the United States to receive OPOLIS's benefits, but OPOLIS is expanding its services to Canada starting on June 1st of next year. So book a 30-minute free consultation with OPOLIS experts and join OPOLIS by December 31st to get 1,000 work and 1,000 bank tokens. Go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. Goldfinch is a decentralized credit protocol with a mission to connect the world's capital to the world's growth. Goldfinch focuses on real yields from real companies, so start lending your USDC to real businesses driving growth worldwide. Goldfinch's borrowers are proven fintechs and credit funds in emerging markets who need access to Goldfinch's capital to drive economic growth in regions faced with barriers to financial access. In just under 2 years, Goldfinch has loaned over 100 million USDC, reaching over 1 million people and businesses across 28 countries. Goldfinch is doing what DeFi was always meant to do, expanding financial access to those who have historically been shut out of the TradFi system. So, become a Goldfinch member to put your USDC to work, empowering real businesses' growth. Join Goldfinch's new member vaults to be an active investor and take part in supporting Goldfinch's security and expansion. Receive yield enhancements generated by protocol revenue, plus access exclusive communication channels and more. So go to goldfinch.finance to get started.
What's up, gentlemen? How you doing?
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
Really glad to have you both here. So you and me, David, have talked a little bit about how crypto is and isn't good for the world. And I got to say, man, this tweet that you sent about how for the first time ever after FTX's collapse, I have nothing to stand on when I say crypto is good for the world. That hit me hard. And you got 2,400 likes on that one. So maybe that's a jumping off point to dive in here. After FTX collapsed, can you tell me what you were thinking as you sent this tweet?
Yeah, I think a lot of the industry went into a moment of reflection after FTX, and I think it's really because it was the third of three major events that were kind of similar-ish. 3AC, the destruction of 3 Years Capital, the destruction of Terra Luna, now the destruction of FTX. It was just like, man, this keeps on happening, man. Like this is what 2022 was. And so it took me just like a moment of reflection to be like, it seems to have dominated. 2022 just seems to be dominated by just people losing money.
Yeah.
And in an industry that is supposed to be about like, self-sovereign asset owning and, permissionless freedom. It's like, we have the tools that have been specifically built to prevent this. And then it seems to actually enable it somehow. And I think I was just like me and a lot of the industry were just in this mind state of just like momentary capitulation of just like, damn, man, like sweet. The theoretical use cases of crypto are amazing, but everything bad that's happened about crypto happened in 2022. And so like taking just like, and I love everyone in crypto because we're all futurists, right? We're all idealists. We're optimists about the future. But then like 2022 comes and punches you in the gut, and then another time, and then another time. And it's like, all right, well, like me and Ryan, we call ourselves like storytellers. Like we're trying to get people to be on the Bankless journey, right? So we got to tell the story because that's how humans learn things. And it's like, sweet, like we're just making something out of nothing, right? We're just making it up and hoping it sticks. And meanwhile, like people keep on losing money to things like Terra Luna and FTX and like Do Kwon and all that stuff. So it's just like a moment of like frustration about some of the bad stuff, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. I think it's clear when I talk to you that we believe that crypto can be good for the world, and I'd like to make this episode about how it actually achieves that goal of being good for the world. And so I'd love to hear from you, Juan, next about how FTX hit you, and as a long-term builder, what your take is on the FTX implosion.
Yeah, look, I'm tremendously disappointed. I think it is a huge disaster for our community in the ways that were totally preventable. Like our community and what we've been building for crypto stands precisely against the kind of problems that led to this downfall. I've been around since very early, like before 2012, 13 is when I started getting into Bitcoin and crypto and so on. And a lot of it is about creating public verifiable structures where you do not have to trust people to act correctly and so on. And I think what is especially disappointing is how many good things we're starting to get funded that now are totally destroyed because of this. And just a huge overhang that's going to come into the whole community. And so it feels like we've unwound some amount of work. Now, to your question, this is precisely why we're here. Like, I think, if anything, this is a massive reminder of the work that we're doing and why it matters. The fact that these kinds of mistakes should not happen, and where we can build economies that are free of this kind of mistake and this kind of just beyond mistaken, right? Like, this is it's unclear still how everything exactly happened, but there's at least significant evidence of serious fraud that should be completely avoidable with cryptographic primitives. And this is why we build these things. We're not here for CeFi. We're here for DeFi at least. And I'm personally here for ReFi, where you're even moving away from the traditional structures. Exchanges and investing and so on should be like the minority use case of crypto. Crypto should be about building a much better economic structure, a much better set of economic primitives, where we're building longstanding superstructures that are able to give us utilities that are able to build a much more open financial system, a much more open economy, where you can build massive scale services and infrastructure without having to rely on corporations, without having to rely on small groups, without having to rely on individuals to remain honest. And this is a massive reminder for all of us that, hey, we have an enormous amount of work to do, and we have to be constantly vigilant to make sure that the groups that come in are true to the values and true to the goals. And we don't just take their word for it. We sort of force it. We force verifiability, we force accountability, we force public verifiability in a cryptographic sense. Math doesn't lie. Um, you can build drastically better structures, and that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. We've made a lot of progress, bunch of setbacks, but I think overall it is massively good for the world. And I think even though this is a super disappointing week, it is not just a reminder. It is a reinforcement of the good that we've done already. So the fact that this
Right.
is shocking to us comes from a place of we're already in a much better world. Right? So if it wind back the clock to why Bitcoin started, 2008, the financial crisis there, it was an escape hatch from that type of disaster and not having any alternative. Today, we have alternatives, and we're disappointed and shocked because they weren't followed.
One of the things that sort of stands out for me, and I'm curious if it resonates with y'all, is the difference between the first time user experience. If you're Joe the plumber, if you're Joe Main Street and you use crypto for the first time, it looks way different to you than if you're someone with a computer science degree working in industry that understands why DeFi is powerful, and you understand why not your keys, not your crypto. And I wish there was a way to bridge people from that first time user without having to go through these massive detonation events where people lose their money. Because when people lose their money, that's when the regulators start sniffing around and they start saying, we're going to regulate this from without instead of crypto regulating it from within. So just acknowledging that massive delta between what we see as people who live and breathe this stuff versus what people who are using it casually see, for me, is maybe a starting point in recognizing the vantage point between how Main Street views crypto and how we view crypto.
On the regulation of crypto from within, I really think that this was totally avoidable by forcing a certain set of standards from within our community about what different kinds of financial institutions should be doing with funds, with user representations, and so on. And this doesn't at all require external governments to define it. I think that this is standards that we should be placing, and it is our own fault as a community for not requiring those when we were kind of supporting and promoting a lot of these groups. And so sort of, a lot of people kind of have a lot of trust in community leaders on kind of where to go and what products are good and so on, and having our own notion of standards of what qualifies as a legit crypto institution that follows the crypto values and has public verifiability. That's something that we can build ourselves. And then the other part is we probably could have. We have the coordination tools, and what crypto is extremely good for is to coordinate out of massive problems. We have the coordination tools to avert this kind of disaster, right? So Kevin, you and I talked about this, but I was sort of shocked that this week alone, the sort of crypto market cap was shaved by 20 to 30% over this disaster, and averting the catastrophe probably would have been 1% or less than 1% when it started. And we just lacked the coordination primitives to solve the problem on the get-go. A, to prevent it in the first place, and B, to act as it's happening. And so this is something where it has made me consider how we as a community should be, what kind of structure should we put in place to avoid these kinds of financial disasters, or kind of step in to take them in a different course. And that's a lot of possibilities there, but I think it's a stuff that I hadn't been thinking about before.
I've always considered markets are just like this hive mind of people, right? Like with the market price of something, it's just like the collective intelligence of so many different market participants, and then boom, we have a price on the secondary market. Like markets remember because it's all of our collective brains. They also have memory, and like humans, the way our brains work is that we encode memories much faster if there's pain involved, if there's suffering involved. And so like kind of how like Mount Gox was a meme that probably added a lot of energy to the Bitcoiner chant of like, not your keys, not your crypto. That's probably what the legacy of FTX is going to be, where like it imprints upon us, like people that came after Mount Gox that didn't learn these lessons personally, that of some of the values, right? So I guess there's a reason why Web3 has values, why we talk about values so much, and sometimes in the crypto world things happen that are illustrative of the whole point of why we're here, like exchange hacks, for example, and sometimes like I think moments like this is where it goes from a meme that you hear about on like podcasts or on Twitter into something that like you've actually experienced and you can express for yourself is like why it's important, not because somebody memed it on Twitter or whatever. It's sad that this is how humans learn. It's unfortunate that we have to learn through pain and experiencing it firsthand rather than just like knowing it. But like maybe that is what is the legacy, the good legacy of FTX, is that like it's the new lesson of Mt. Gox for a much wider, broader set of people, regardless of whether they lost money in it or not. So like the other like kind of existential crisis I was having, Kevin, is like, you know how the meme of like the cycle, right? And like you kind of don't make money your first cycle, you always make money your second cycle in crypto. And like I was just feeling like bad about the industry because because we dump on the second cyclers dump on the first cyclers. And so like this crypto world like has this way of just like the only path forward to actually make this thing work is like by hurting people. Like the second cyclers dump on the first cyclers, the first cyclers get Mt. Gox, they get FTX'd. Like so far I haven't like seen crypto progress forward in a way that doesn't hurt people and in a particular way.
I don't think that's true. So, in the times that I've been here, I think that more damage has been done by the same group. It's not kind of like last cyclers on new cyclers or anything like that. At least from my understanding of the
it's
different groups. It's usually the same groups or similar types of groups that come in and predate on people on groups. It's the same kind of overly financialized use cases, overly speculative use cases, the crazy high leverage, the fudging of KYC and AML and all that kind of stuff. It's one thing to kind of have an international exchange or whatever. It's a separate thing to allow a lot of people to participate anyway, wink, wink, and get people wrecked. And I think it's an over focus on financial returns as a community that is hurting us. I think that one of the big things that we as a community need to do is realize that what we have in our hands is new economic superpowers, new economic primitives to build a better economy, not to make people rich. If people want to get rich quick, like that's already like you're starting off in the wrong place. Like you should be focusing on this much better structure of saying, hey, address why you don't have access to resources, why you need money, why you don't have access to good services in your communities. And it's kind of like what we have as a potential here is much more massive than kind of helping a few communities kind of get a leg up. It's much more about rewriting the rules of how capital works, rewriting the rules of our institutions globally. I think we can scale to that. Like crypto it's only like 2 to 4 orders of magnitude away from nation states, and that's not very far.
One of the sort of double-edged swords that this brings up for me is that we can program our values into our money. And that's the ultimate double-edged sword, because if you want to build more public goods, you can build something beautiful and that supports and pay it forward. But if you're just a Ponzi scheme grifter, or you're an SBF or a Do Kwon, you can build giant stuff like that. And it brings me back to this Bankless episode that you did, David, about why is crypto full of scams. And it's because the crypto believers and the core devs are building this beautiful vision of programming our values into our money and building a better world. And then these grifters graft onto it and they corrupt that and bring their own perverted version of crypto to the rest of the world. So I thought you did a really great job with the why is crypto full of scams video, David. And that's kind of informed my mental model for the space as well.
Yeah. Thanks, my man. I think that the line that people need to not be focused on short-term money, and they need to be focused on, like, instead of number going up, they need to be focusing on like economic primitives. It's like a perspective, though. It's like a time horizon perspective that I think you're saying, where you say like, hey, let's focus on not getting rich in 2 years. Let's go focus on making sustainable wealth that'll last us multi-decades. But like, there's still a commitment there at the base layer of like, this is about money. This is about making money, whether or not, like making your net worth go up, whether that's like resources, like cheaper access to commodities, like more sustainable. It's ultimately just about wealth, and so it's just about a time frame thing. It's like, all right, like, do you want to be wealthy in the long term or do you want to be wealthy in the short term? And like all of these like dumb monkeys that inhabit this planet are like, short term. I want it now. And then we have like a bull market and we enable the grifters and like a very small number of people who represent the very core of crypto, to cite the concentric circle model that Kevin was just talking about. Like there needs to be like one of these people needs to be like Vitalik Buterin, who builds Ethereum, and then like, oh, all of a sudden like it scales out to all the dumb monkeys. Now that all the dumb monkeys are on Ethereum, and like but that just takes so long. And like meanwhile, we have like the short termism that just like kind of manifests and expresses around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the private versus public versus network goods differences exist. So, at least I think a lot of there are a lot of communities that are much more focused on building better resource utilization and better progress and better growth, not just kind of individually making more money and making more wealth. And so the difference here being individual private wealth going, number go up for an individual person is it's a different sort of thing than, hey, what if we allocated our efforts better and created more resources better and faster, and we had different ways of allocating them. Like at the end of the day, capital is just a distributed system to try and resource allocate, and it's worked really well for the last couple hundred years for a lot of reasons. It's extremely difficult to centrally plan. We had massive experiments in central planning in the 20th century that totally didn't beat capital. And the point though is like the rules of how capital work today are broken, like are very, very broken. If you look at how you can make dramatically more money in the world by producing really glitzy, not long-term useful things that don't provide any well-being to anybody. Like when you look at reducing mortality or curing diseases or reducing poverty, giving better access to water, like all of these really important things that run the world, you can make way more money by creating some like entertaining thing that just kind of helps people. And nothing bad against entertainment, but it's probably not the most valuable thing that anybody could be doing. And it's the multiples of value in how the broader stock market and the broader economy values these things is much higher. It's extremely short-term oriented, and the long-term oriented stuff goes uninvested in because the rules of capital underneath the hood are kind of broken. And so that's what is extremely promising to me about crypto. And it's already, to a great extent, already making significant advances here. It's enabling lots of groups that are much more long-term oriented to build these institutions and these structures on the internet that don't depend on them, that are creating these long-term oriented digital infrastructure that can give you digital human rights. And that's a super, super, super cool possibility. And I think that's how you get into rewriting capital and getting to a much better place.
The bridge for me between what Juan said and what David said is this idea that Yancey Strickler came up with called bentoism. It stands for beyond near-term orientation. And it's basically going from being incentivized by now me, what's good for me now, to what's good for us now. And then there's another vector, which is the future, which is future me. And then the fourth quadrant is future us. And so basically, if you're in a market where 99% of the, to use David's term, dumb monkeys are just focused on now me and the marshmallow test, there's actually like a market advantage to being someone who doesn't think like that and moves to future us or future me. And maybe this is how this system evolves forward, is as all the gains from failing the marshmallow test and from being from just going for now me dry up, then the market matures and it moves towards a more mature market cycle, which is focused on squad wealth and groups and longer term orientation. And that's where the real advancement in the space happens, in the alignment between the capital cycle and the actual things that are good for the world. And the other analogy that I sort of use is evolution.
If more people choose us in the future, doesn't that also create a market opportunity for someone to defect from that and go back to being me now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the market structure and whether those opportunities have dried up or not. Go ahead, Juan.
I think it's that what we should be shooting for is creating structures where you create alignment between the short-term incentive behavior and the long-term utility. So a
Hmm.
concrete example about this is how Bitcoin itself solved the kind of bootstrapping of the network problem. You create a very short-term oriented incentive for participants to go and mine Bitcoin out of the ether in a sense, and you then create a way for alignment of the broader network and the security of the network and the broader distribution of the network. And like that's what we should be. It's way harder to shoot for that because you have to discard a ton of mechanisms that are going to be either. It's way easier if you're solving for one thing, either short term or long term. It's way harder if you're trying to solve for both. But if we can create structures that align those incentives, where our individual marginal short term return is what produces the good long-term results, like that's the promise. Is like, can we, if we can build better infrastructure like that and better economic primitives and better services and better uh, yeah, a better economy that can get you there. That's what I think is super cool about it. Not just cool, it's a extremely promising and already having impact. I think it's to the question about the accounting of how the sort of like the utility and the benefits versus the damage. My sense on all of this is that crypto comes out dramatically ahead on benefit, even despite all of these big problems, because of the utility already created of having this alternative financial system that is programmable, that can give you digital rights. That is a thing that did not at all exist before. And the fact that you just the fact that you can have smart contracts on Ethereum and you can create the notions of rights and encode them there and coordinate groups of people to build things like DAOs, to build things like um, crypto networks. Like it's just it's amazing relative to what we had before, and I think that that's already extremely valuable compared to the massive capital destruction that some grifters along the way have managed to cause.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. The world has woken up to refi, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer 1 for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed to producing a sustainable future from day one and has built its technology around one of the lowest carbon impact consensus mechanisms, and is the world's first carbon negative EVM compatible layer 1 blockchain. CELO is a movement to create the conditions of prosperity for everyone, whether it's tokenizing carbon credits with Toucan, providing capital to underserved communities with Unicorn, or building for millions of users around the globe. CELO was created to transform crypto enthusiasts into a movement of changemakers. Follow along on Twitter at CELO.org to learn more about how CELO is accelerating refi for a positive, lasting impact on people, communities, and the planet. And if you're a builder interested in refi, be sure to join the Build with CELO hackathon live now with a prize pool of over $100,000.
I think that one of the challenges that I see, and by the way, this is an idea that I got from the Web3 is Going Great episode, which just aired on Bankless, is Molly White in that episode points out that a lot of the expected value of crypto being good for the world is in the future, whereas we just have we just touched the hot stove with FTX this past week. And I don't totally buy that. I mean, the positive ability for people in Argentina to access USD from anywhere, do remittances in anywhere in the world, like Gitcoin rounds on climate, like those are all things that exist today. Like Uniswap exists today, and so I don't totally buy that. But I do think that one thing we have to be mindful of an industry is like pushing. We need to start realizing those positive externalities soon and start scaling them up to be at like FTX $50 billion scale, I think.
Yeah, there's also the problem that all the good things in the world become normal, and then all the bad things in the news bad things in the world go on the news. Like if it bleeds, it leads, right? And so like there's also just like a public perception crisis, and in, like in technologies in their infancy, it's just like super easy to hate on them, right? Like it's so easy. You can just like go to Reddit right now and be like NFT's bad, and you'll get like 10,000 upvotes. And so like and now like. I think that's probably why I felt like so demoralized this last week, and so many in the crypto industry kind of said they felt the same. Is like, there's what do we take to the normies right now? What do we take back home to Thanksgiving and say, hey, I'm proud of my industry. I'm proud of what I do here. And like, there are very real things like remittances, sick, like Argentines getting out of inflation, saving people's lives, but like. You take it home and people are like, oh, honey, I heard like the Sam Bankman guy like ran off to Argentina with $10 billion of people's deposits. And like, and like, even when you know everything's like everything is like the real stuff is there. It's like hard to keep on fighting it, man.
Especially hard in countries where you have a good financial stack, right? So a lot of our perspective comes from countries that have good financial stacks. I was born and grew up in Mexico, in a place where it has a lot. It's an amazing country, really natural resource wealthy, amazing people everywhere, super thoughtful, long-term oriented, and in a lot of ways super community oriented, and yet massive amount of corruption in governments and in other systems that has created a financial stack that is not aligned with long-term success for communities and is aligned with bribery and corruption all the way through. And so just the idea that you could have a community of people gathering together their resources and having it in a secure environment that is not going to like disappear overnight because like the bank happened to be, have somebody corrupt there that routed the money somewhere else or something like that is a massive, massive improvement. And you can there's like a 50x 50 billion problem, but there's the $1 trillion level amount of value created in this broader economy, and how much of that is we should ideally segment it out to understand how much of that is kind of financial instrument speculation versus these broader important use cases, and kind of understand, have like the real KPIs. That's something maybe that we can do is like create a kind of, here are the crypto KPIs that we should all be shooting for to create utility for the world. What are we aiming for as a community, and what's an honest rating of like where we are and where we're headed.
I think it's probably also important to remember that this was just like one guy who like didn't care about crypto to begin with, right? That was like a lot of people's critiques of SBF from the get-go. Is like the guy openly admits that he's just in crypto for the opportunity. Like he told that to our faces. And so like, Enron, like Lehman, SBF and FTX. These are just like one sets of entities. I don't know if there's anybody specifically malicious at Lehman, but like Bernie Madoff, for example, or like these are just like one like lunatic, one like sociopath lunatic who did this. And like crypto is actually technically like just adjacent to that fact rather than a core part of it. Like it's interesting that we all feel compelled to like come on and like start to like make sure we're legitimizing Web3 when it's actually just like this one lunatic in a bank who ran off with $10 billion is making us feel this way. Like each one of those, like the Ponzi's that happened in the TradFi world ended up ultimately coming to bring like regulation. But maybe if I'm like thinking with like rosy colored glasses, like, well, fine, then like, let's do it. Because crypto knows how to regulate ourselves, and we have a very strong presence in Congress or in just like in that legal side of the world. I think we're good at that, and we've been asking for it for a really long time. So maybe there's some good silver lining here.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the regulators are educated and the political process in Washington works, and let's keep in mind that SBF and FTX was CeFi. Whereas regulating DeFi I think is a whole another animal,
right?
So
this might be a useful conversation starter to emphasize that point between DeFi and CeFi that we need the regulators to understand.
Yeah, absolutely, that's a great starting point.
like we probably should have a website that describes the, like, here's what CeFi is, here's what DeFi is, here's what refi is.
Yeah, I would look to Coin Center and others like them to kind of educate us on how, like, I've DM'd them and I'd be like, let me go on a green pill tour of Capitol Hill. And I have a list of 100 different projects that are good for the world in crypto. And I just want them to see
Right.
that, if they squash this industry, what they'll be losing. But, I think that we have to really follow Coin Center's lead there.
Yeah, and Blockchain Station might be another good group that you can point
Mhm.
to about that. They work a lot with regulators both in the US and outside. And look, I think right now as an industry, we need to uh, get super clear about the difference between CeFi and DeFi, because what is the kind of knee-jerk reaction here is going to be to say, oh, look, FTX, crypto disaster, see,
Yeah.
crypto's all bad. And we need to be make 100% clear and obvious to everybody in the world that this happened because of traditional finance rules, not
Yeah.
because of crypto rules.
I mean, yeah, FTX
It
was just kind of TradFi on crypto rails.
yeah.
It was a bank.
It's like it's like, of course, it's like, this is precisely why we're here. It's like, so that you don't have to trust people to agree on what they wrote on a document, right? Like, what happened here at the end of the day is a set of people were supposed to be bound by certain rules and restrictions, and they said they were going to do X on paper, and they signed it. Many people, and it's not just SPF. There's a lot of people here. Many people did this, and yet they went and did something different. And that is precisely why we're here, so that we can have math that prevents that, so that nobody can lie like that. Nobody
Mhm.
can have the ability to take customer funds and move them somewhere else. And look, it's hard. Like, there's been a lot of, another area that we need to improve is making things way less hackable, way better smart contract security,
Yeah.
so that it's not as hard. Like, the reason people go to these CeFi things is because they feel safer in some
Yeah.
regards than some of
It's the
the
bridges that do this
yeah.
for me. I know how to write a smart contract without reentrancy attacks, but all these bridge exploits are really scary. But it seems like so far most of the VCs behind the bridge teams will bail them out so that there's no customer loss fund.
No,
So
we
it's a
can't
little bit
depend on
different.
that though. They will until they won't.
Yeah. Well, if we're gonna if we're gonna bet on modular blockchains as the foundational layer, I just think that the bridges need to get an order of magnitude easier to use and more secure.
On that note, I think really the solution for that is actually just removing the bridges. There should just be no bridges.
Mhm.
And I guess, is that possible with a layer two? I think it's possible inside. I like Optimism's code reuse strategy of modularity, where like they have different modules and you use that same module over and over and over again. I think like
Mhm.
modularity is probably an important like step to ensuring secure code. But maybe it's like the Steam engine, man. Maybe it just takes
But you can
time.
always create a derivative on both spots that have some that track some oracle somewhere and so on. Like, I don't think you can, like, there's one economy on the planet, right? Like, humanity has one economy, it has subparts, and you can try and increase or decrease couplings. And yeah, we
Mhm.
definitely shouldn't have a bunch of unsafe bridges. And maybe we should be decreasing the use of bridges for now while we figure out how to get them right. Um,
Right.
but if somebody wants to move around value, they're going to be able to move around value with synthetic instruments. It's just a matter of um, clearly specifying all the risks and bounding them economically and enforceable by by the code. Um,
Mhm.
the fact that right now you can kind of move around assets and they can have lagging prices just opens up an enormous opportunity for all these arbitrage type movements, right? So the Alamedas of the world to move around billions from chain to chain to chain, um, like relying on kind of uh, tickers being different and then making a ton of extracting a lot of value. It's kind of MEV on steroids. Cause the MEV problem, but between chains, and that just shouldn't be doable. Like, you should have a much faster information flow between all the chains, and you should be
Mhm.
able to take much more calculated um, uh, risks with whatever assets you're moving.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of this infrastructure is on the roadmap, just not here yet. Given that we only have 10 minutes left, I'd love to reorient the conversation around the reason why we're recording this episode, which is how can we make crypto good for the world? So, I guess that's the question that I'll just re-ask as we're starting to get into closing here. What would have to be true for crypto to be unequivocally, massively a positive influence on the world?
Well, I mean, I already think it is. And so, like, why? What boxes has it checked that makes
Mhm.
that true? Um, I think the answer is like straight up, it puts more money and wealth into the hands of more people than it takes away.
Mhm.
And like that can't be true without crypto can't be adopted without that being true. Like if
Mhm.
it takes away money from you, people are not going to go there. If it gives you money, people are going to go there. Why do people come in to the top of the bull markets? Because it's crypto's putting more money in more people's hands.
Mhm.
And like then they leave during the bear markets because that stopped being true. But some people stick around because they're like, oh, I think this still might give me money in the future, and they stick around during the bear market. And it's like, why is crypto being adopted in Argentina? Well, because DAI doesn't inflate at the same rate of the peso. It's putting more money into more people's hands, and so that's always been. It's literally why we're here. It's kind of about the money, and like people that say it's about the technology. Well, the technology is about the money, and so I think it's just a simple function of like how it is just like sustainable wealth generation. At the end of the day, it's like crypto is this massive like oil well, those oil wells that are like spitting out of the ground, and like we're all like dancing around this oil well. It's like, oh, like wealth generation, and now we need to figure out how to make that well never ever ever dry up. And so like we already have this well spitting out a bunch of like resources that like is enough to sustain this industry at $800 billion market cap. How do we engineer using code to make sure that this well never dries up and it actually spews out more oil over time? That's what we need to do.
Juan, what do you think?
So
Same question to you.
a few things. Just one on the oil well thing. It's about uh, generating that kind of utility. It's like generating the oil type thing, and it's not, it's generating that set of economic opportunity to coordinate us and to enable us to improve resource allocation. Um, the what I think it needs to be true is, first and foremost, we need to have um, broad digital infrastructure that can give us digital human rights, and what that means is we need a credible foundation, like robust foundation for speech, for transactions, for messages, for email, for broad communications between humans around the world. That is close. Like we're relatively close. We're not quite there. But I think once we achieve that, crypto's going to be in a dramatically better position in having helped um, billions of people around the planet. The second is a we need the financial use cases to be less than 10%. Uh, economy and economic use cases and financial use cases are somewhat different. Like individual um, money and so on, and individual private wealth is different from the broad economic um, structures that coordinate us. And so I think we need
Right.
to
The
get to a
economy is
point
the
where
world and finance is Wall Street.
exactly. And so like let's make the Wall Street part of crypto tiny in comparison to the other stuff. Less than 10% ideally. And I think right now, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably like closer to 50 or 60, maybe 70. And so that needs to get much smaller. Yeah, and that by market cap, right? Probably not by maybe the allocation of people working. So if you maybe track it by headcount of who's working on what, that probably looks different. But um, the the market cap probably stacks it that way. And then I think one of the things we need to get to is just super user friendly primitives that can be deployed quickly, right? Like uh,
Mhm.
Kevin, like we could have averted this disaster as a community. We could have stepped in and averted the problem. We just didn't have the tools to do it fast enough. We couldn't coordinate a massive response as a community, and even ahead of
Mhm.
that, we couldn't coordinate the checks and balances on these institutions to make sure they're not grifting people and they're not violating their own rules.
Yeah.
We could totally establish a self-regulation type labeling of exchanges and traditional institutions that tell us which ones are legit passing requirements. Don't just count on exchanges out of the goodness of their heart imposing their own rules on themselves, like proof of custody and like proof of reserves and all that kind of stuff. But just enforce it at a community-wide level. Like, we don't need any government outside of crypto to tell us that. And then I think like we need to have a KPI around being able to have people from around the world, billions of people around the world, being able to find jobs through crypto. So one of the things that I have always thought has been amazing about the crypto space is that you can be anywhere in the world, and if you have connectivity to the internet, you can find a way to trade your time for money in some way to buy food and shelter and so on. And that has lifted thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty in the world. Like, crypto has probably done that. It probably hasn't lifted millions or tens of millions. It's probably in the tens to hundreds of thousands. But if we can get that to, say, the crypto world employs more people around the planet than almost any other industry, where whoever anywhere around the world can look at their own skill sets and find some project to work on, some project to contribute to that is going to give them a better alternative than local employment. Like, that could be a phenomenal place to be in. And I don't think we're that far away from that.
I also think it's a huge opportunity of growth for Web3, because for 97% of humanity, their financial lives, and by the way, we're building the internet of finance here, their financial lives is their jobs and their communities, not their bags and their investments. So if crypto wants to grow, then I think the internet of jobs and Web3 jobs is just kind of a necessity direction that it's going to go.
To add on to what Juan was saying, the first thing Juan was saying about how like we need to reduce the financial parts of crypto to like less than 10%. It makes sense. Like, if you go through the trajectory of crypto, like first we made Bitcoin, so that's money. The next big thing that we made was Ethereum, which is like finance, smart contracts. And Ethereum has largely actually kind of just become one big exchange. Like, if you go to ultrasound.money and you look at which applications are burning the most ether, it's Uniswap and OpenSea, like the marketplaces, the bazaars. And so, well, that just makes sense, right? From Genesis, like first we make money, then we make finance, then we make the stock exchanges. Like, that seems like a logical order of operations. Now we need to put more things on the stock exchange instead of making more money markets or like leverage stock exchanges or like whatever. We need to make more tokens that go on those things, right? And that's the economy side of things. That's the culture side of things. And like, so Bankless, for example, we're making an NFT project. It's not a secret. And it's gonna be like your passport into the Web3, into the Bankless like version of Web3. And like, what do? You get all these extra cool things that will pile onto this token, and people are gonna want it because of the things that it does for the owner. And that's commerce, that's economy, not finance. And so I really like that. And so, like, we have the stock exchange, we have this bazaar where a lot of people go and they trade their goods. And I think Juan's just saying like, well, we need like neighborhoods and houses and avenues and business stores for those people to go to. Yeah. And so, like, sweet, we have Wall Street, and now we need like the rest of Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island and all these other, and then all of a sudden we have the world. I think that's probably what we need. We need more nouns in the crypto space.
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would look at the most used applications on the internet, so either websites or mobile apps, and then sort them by how easy is it to build them in with crypto in Web3, and then just sort of get started. And there are some that are just you can't do today. So you can't do Twitter on Web3 yet. There's a lot of work that needs to happen in order to scale to that. I would guess that's 2 to 3 years out, but it's not 10 years out. But can you do? Can you make a much sounder real estate market? That might be kind of, again, too close to finance maybe, but that's potentially something that can leverage all of the structures today to help a lot of the world, especially those countries that don't have good financial stacks. But then go beyond that and go into whenever I hear people talking about Web3 games and so on, it is always overly financialized. Like it's like that's not the point. It's like, hey, can we go and make the communities and digital worlds that we love playing and engaging in, and can we make that activity have regenerative economic loops in there? Like that's a very different kind of orientation. And so when is Web3 going to be ready for that kind of environment? And yeah, like I think maybe what crypto needs to get better is both an impact compass and a moral compass. And if we can make that into websites where you can always go into like, how good is crypto for the world .io or whatever, and you can see the KPIs, you can see how many people are now. We talked about bank the unbanked. Well, how many people are there really? Like there are probably hundreds of thousands of millions, but not 100 million.
Juan, what I worry about with that is that people hear that and they just hear ESG. And I think that the ESG ratings have a lot of problems with them that people in crypto have pointed out. And, if there's going to be impact ratings in Web3, they have to be decentralized. They can't be capturable. They need to actually inform where money and capital rotate into in like a way that has teeth, as opposed to, I just think that like, the ESG thing, I don't think that reinventing ESG on Web3 is a good direction. I know that you're not saying that, but I just want to say that out loud so the listeners hear that we're talking about something fundamentally decentralized, uncapturable, and a fundamentally new structure that helps rotate capital and talent towards things that are actually good for people and good for the world. And maybe the inverse of impact ratings for positive stuff is impact rating for negative things, like developing an immune system so that we spot the next 3AC or the next SBF early, and almost like a prediction market where people can be rewarded for routing those out, I think would be the inverse of that. And that would be massively useful to the space.
I think it's also worth noting that if something like FTX, if we're worried about like, hey, let's make sure we don't get FTX'd again, maybe people should take custody of their own assets and not do that and like use Web3 in the way that's meant to be used. If we want that world, which we do, account abstraction like has to be mentioned. There's no way that we onboard the world without account abstraction. And so I think if this is just like something to be learned about anything or about where to redirect resources as a result of this, is probably we should make account abstraction happen faster.
Yeah. And much, we need, I really like Ledger. It would be great to have many devices that are extremely good like that. Like, why is there only like 2 or 3 that are reasonably good? And even those are still pretty hard to use. And yeah, like the kind of abstraction stuff to be able to get, social recovery and all that kind of stuff is really key.
Honestly, Ledger should really take a leadership position with account abstraction, because like they're going to need to pivot their business model as soon as account abstraction is like the new standard, the new status quo. So maybe this is like a call on Ledger, like, yo, like you guys make account abstraction happen, because it's going to be super relevant for your business model.
I think probably one last thing I would love to mention is like this road is pretty long. It's pretty hard. A lot of us have been working on this for it's going to be like 10 years for me. I guess this year is like, 9 to 10 years. And we've made an enormous amount of progress in a lot of fronts. I think a lot of us feel that the world is orders of magnitude better than it used to be because of some components, but we all probably feel it's going too slowly. When we look at the social networks and other movements of the internet, they've moved faster. And so the big thing that we need to do and coordinate around is understand what's holding us back, what's preventing that kind of faster exponential improvement, and get ourselves on a train to finish this work faster, because it cannot take another 15 years to get to that success. We need to achieve a lot of these things in 5 to 10. And I think like that's, there's a whole other, reason to bet on crypto and bet on these things around. I'll just kind of like describe it here briefly. There's a very strong possibility that the traditional financial system is going to get something similar to crypto rails, like all the CBDCs and so on. And it's going to lead to some of the strongest Orwellian states ever imaginable, because they're going to create a structure where, even computers are fast enough that you could literally have, before any transaction happens, a query going to a centralized database asking, should you, Kevin, should you, David, right now be allowed to buy this glass of water, or like this gas for your car, or this car in the first place? And that future could be really dark around the world. We're starting to see it with the Chinese credit system and the prevention of access to infrastructure and prevention of access to travel and other things. CBDCs and the kind of super powerful centralized financial control that's going to be possible thanks to them, like enable this kind of very dark potential future. And so there's a really big thing that crypto is a massive shield against all of that. Like if you go back to the cypherpunk mailing list and where it all started, cryptography and cryptoeconomics is a massive shield against that kind of abuse. And if we're really serious about that and we're going to complete that work, it needs to happen sooner, because these large scale systems are starting to get deployed. And so I want to kind of like have a really strong call to action in our community to clean up our act, to have way higher standards for ourselves than traditional world, to really focus on the non-financial use cases, to saddle up for the long term, because it's been 10 years, it's going to be a while longer, but really make strong improvements and hold ourselves to those goals. Like have a mission, have specific goals, have a plan for when we're going to achieve them, and let's get there.
Thanks, Juan. David, wondering if you have any final thoughts.
No, but I think it's up only from here. So
There's a place to end. All right. Well, thank you both for joining me.
thanks, Taylor.